The girl in the garbage. The twin suns of Virelia burned red above the ruined city, the air filled with smoke and dust. Old metal scraps and melted machines were piled high across the streets, forming mountains of junk and forgotten dreams. Among them, a small alien girl with torn clothes moved slowly, her thin fingers digging through garbage, searching for something, anything, to eat. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes glowing faintly with sadness, and her stomach growled so loudly that even the scavenger birds turned away. She picked up a piece of dry bread, half covered in oil, and without thinking, she bit it, coughing as the bitter taste filled her mouth. Nearby, a group of alien traders laughed, pointing at her from behind their stalls. "Look at her," one said, "the trash eater." Another threw a metal can toward her, making her flinch. She did not look back. She was too weak to fight, too used to being insulted. For her, this was just another day of survival. The war had ended years ago, but peace had never come to the poor. Lyra, that was her name, had once lived in a small home with her parents before soldiers burned their district. Now she lived in shadows, in places where no one cared who lived or died. The people around her hated her kind, calling them the failed ones. They said her race brought bad luck. They said she carried the curse of lost technology. So Lyra stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the ground, always hoping the next piece of trash might save her life. But then, someone saw her. A man stood at the edge of the market, tall and calm, dressed in a dusty brown jacket with a human insignia on his arm. He was not from this world. His name was Ethan, a human explorer working for the Galactic Reconstruction Corps. He was supposed to be inspecting old war zones for hidden tech, but when he saw the girl, he stopped walking. Her small hands trembled as she clutched the dirty bread. Her ribs were visible through her clothes, and her face was covered in grime. Ethan's chest tightened. Something inside him stirred, a mix of pity and anger. He had seen suffering before, but this felt different. There was innocence in her eyes, something pure even under the dirt and fear. The crowd noticed his stare. "Hey, human," one of them shouted. "Don't bother with her, she's a street rat." Ethan didn't answer. He walked closer, his boots crushing bits of glass and metal. Lyra froze. She thought he was coming to chase her away like the others. Her heart pounded as he stopped a few feet away. Then he did something no one expected. He knelt down, slowly, his voice soft. "Hey, are you hungry?" he asked. The market went silent for a moment. Some laughed again, others whispered. Lyra looked up, confused, her lips trembling. She didn't understand why a human, of all creatures, would speak to her kindly. Ethan opened his pack and pulled out a protein bar, still sealed. He placed it on the ground in front of her and waited. "No tricks," he said quietly. "Take it." She hesitated, her eyes darting from him to the bar, to the watching crowd. Finally, she snatched it and took a bite. Her eyes widened. Real food, soft and sweet, something she hadn't tasted in months. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she ate silently, afraid it might vanish. Ethan smiled slightly, his voice calm. "Come with me, you can't stay here." The laughter returned from the crowd, louder this time. "Humans gone mad," someone yelled. "He's taking the trash girl home." But Ethan ignored them, his gaze never leaving her frightened eyes. He extended his hand toward her, his palm open. Lyra stepped back, shaking her head. "No," she whispered, her voice weak. "People hurt me when I go with them." Ethan sighed, understanding her fear. "I'm not them," he said, his voice low but steady. "I won't hurt you, I promise." Something in his tone made her pause. It wasn't pity, it was truth. She looked at his face, saw the tired lines, the honest eyes, the small scar near his temple. He looked like someone who had lost things too, someone who knew pain. The crowd began to scatter, bored now that there was no fight. Ethan stayed kneeling, patient, waiting for her choice. Finally, Lyra reached out her small hand and touched his, trembling. His hand was warm, gentle, real. As they walked away from the marketplace, the suns began to set. The red light stretched across the wasteland, painting the metal ruins gold. Behind them, laughter faded into silence. Ethan didn't look back, he just led her through the winding streets toward his transport. Lyra glanced once over her shoulder, the market now just a blur of noise and smoke. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar, hope. She didn't know where he was taking her, or why. But the way he said, "Come with me," felt like a promise. A promise that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change forever. And so, under the dying light of two suns, a starving alien child and a tired human soldier walked side by side. No one believed that a small act of kindness could change a galaxy. But that night, it began to. The shelter. The journey from the market to the edge of the desert was long and silent. Lyra sat in the back seat of Ethan's transport ship, her hands tightly wrapped around the protein bar wrapper, as if it were something sacred. The hum of the engines filled the space, and the red sky slowly turned into a canvas of stars. She watched from the small window, her reflection faint and tired, her eyes glowing dimly in the dark. Ethan glanced at her through the rear mirror, wondering how someone so small had survived this long in such a cruel world. When they arrived at his outpost, the doors hissed open, revealing a small metal shelter built between two cliffs. It was quiet, protected from sandstorms, filled with scattered equipment, maps, and blinking screens. Lyra hesitated to step out, her bare feet trembling on the cold metal floor. Ethan held the door open. "Come in," he said. "You'll be safe here." She didn't move, afraid this was another trick, another false kindness. But then she saw something that made her take a step forward, a small heating lamp glowing warm and soft. For her, warmth meant life, and that was enough to follow. Inside, Ethan handed her a blanket and a bottle of clean water. "Drink slowly," he said. "Your body's weak." Lyra stared at the water for a long time before taking a sip. It was pure, clean, and it burned her throat as if reminding her she was still alive. Ethan turned away, pretending to check his communicator, but he was watching her reflection on the metal wall. He could see the fear in her every movement, the way she flinched whenever a sound echoed too loudly. It made his chest tighten. He had seen refugees, soldiers, and victims of war, but this girl carried a different kind of silence, the silence of someone who had forgotten what kindness felt like. That night, Ethan cooked a simple meal, dehydrated soup mixed with a bit of protein paste. The smell filled the small outpost, and Lyra's eyes followed every movement of his hands. When he placed the bowl in front of her, she waited, expecting him to take a bite first. When he did, only then did she eat. Her small hands trembled as she lifted the spoon. After a few bites, her lips quivered, tears sliding down her cheeks without a sound. Ethan didn't ask why. He knew enough to understand. Instead, he said softly, "You don't have to thank me." She nodded slightly, unable to find words. After a while, she whispered her name, "Lyra." He smiled gently. "Ethan," he replied, tapping his chest. "Ethan," she repeated carefully, and for the first time, a faint smile touched her lips. When the night deepened, Lyra sat near the heating lamp, her eyes half closed. Ethan gave her an old sleeping mat and stepped outside to check the perimeter. The desert stretched endlessly under the twin moons. He stared at the horizon, thinking about what he had done. Humans were told not to interfere with local species, not to bring outsiders into classified bases. But he couldn't leave her there, not in that marketplace where cruelty was normal. Maybe he was breaking a rule, but to him, it felt like saving a life. Inside, Lyra couldn't sleep. She kept looking around the small room, filled with strange human objects, tools, blinking lights, soft music coming from a broken radio. She reached out and touched a small photo frame lying on the table. It showed Ethan standing with two other humans, smiling, holding helmets under a bright sky. Behind the photo was a symbol, Earth's flag, something she had only heard about in stories. Humans were said to be dangerous, conquerors, but this one didn't seem dangerous at all. He was quiet, patient, and his eyes were tired but kind. For the first time in years, she felt safe enough to close her eyes. Ethan came back inside and saw her asleep near the lamp. He covered her with another blanket, then sat at his desk, typing his report. But the words wouldn't come. Subject, local child found. He typed, then deleted it. He stared at the screen for a long time before finally writing. Subject, survivor found. Possibly unique energy signature. Keeping under observation. He paused again, feeling guilty. He wasn't keeping her for research. He just wanted to protect her. Yet even he knew, deep down, that something about her was different. The scanners on his wrist device had shown unusual readings. Light energy pulsing from her veins, almost like living electricity. He turned to look at her sleeping form, her faintly glowing eyes closed peacefully. "What are you, Lyra?" he whispered under his breath. The base lights flickered for a moment, as if the shelter itself heard him. He frowned, tapping the control panel, thinking it was a power glitch. But then everything returned to normal. Outside, a cold wind howled, but inside the small outpost, there was warmth, a fragile, quiet warmth born not from technology, but from kindness. Before sleeping, Ethan wrote one last line in his log. "Tomorrow, I'll try to learn her story." He looked at her again, wrapped in the blanket, holding the empty protein wrapper like a treasure. He smiled faintly and turned off the main lights, leaving only the soft orange glow of the heater. Lyra murmured something in her sleep, a word in her alien tongue that sounded almost like home. Ethan leaned back in his chair, whispering to himself, "Maybe that's what we both need." And as the stars shimmered above the desert sky, the human and the alien slept under the same roof. Two lost souls brought together not by destiny or command, but by a single moment of mercy. Neither of them knew it yet, but that small act would soon echo across the stars, changing everything. The secret. Morning came slowly over the desert, the pale suns rising behind a wall of dust. Inside the outpost, soft rays of light filtered through the vents, touching the metal floor where Lyra sat quietly. Ethan was fixing a power cable near the wall, humming a tune from Earth, his jacket tied around his waist. Lyra watched him carefully, curiosity in her bright eyes. For the first time, she wasn't afraid, she was simply curious. The human world felt strange but calm, filled with rules she didn't yet understand. Ethan looked back and smiled. "You can come closer," he said, pointing at the small toolkit beside him. She hesitated, then slowly moved forward, her steps light and careful. He handed her a small device, a scanner used to detect heat leaks in the cables. "Here, hold it like this," he said, guiding her small fingers. But the moment she touched the scanner, it beeped wildly, lights flashing red. Ethan frowned, tapping it twice, thinking it was broken. The screen showed high energy levels, coming not from the cables, but from her hands. He looked at her, puzzled. "That's not possible," he whispered. Lyra dropped the device instantly, her expression filled with fear. "I didn't mean to," she cried, stepping back. "I didn't break it." Ethan raised his hands quickly. "Hey, it's okay, calm down." He picked up the scanner and switched it off, his mind racing. He had seen strange readings before in battlefields, radiation, energy surges, alien cores, but never from a living being. He decided to pretend it was nothing, not wanting to frighten her more. "See? It's fine," he said gently. "Maybe it was just a glitch." But the thought wouldn't leave his mind. Who was this girl? Over the next few days, Ethan noticed other strange things. Whenever Lyra walked past the console, the screens flickered softly. When she touched the heating lamp, its glow brightened on its own. The communication panels sometimes activated even without input. It was as if her presence whispered to the machines. He tried not to show his surprise, but at night, when she slept, he ran quiet diagnostics. The readings all said the same thing. There was a living energy field surrounding her, something that no known species should have. One evening, as the wind howled outside, Ethan finally asked, "Lyra, can I ask you something?" She looked up from her blanket, clutching a metal cup of warm water. "Your body, it gives off energy," he said softly. "The machines react to you. Do you know why?" Lyra stared into the cup, her hands trembling slightly. After a long silence, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, "I know." Ethan waited, patient, his expression calm. Lyra took a deep breath, her voice shaking. "I was born in a lab, not in a home." Her words hit him like a wave. "A lab?" he asked quietly. She nodded again. "My people made me. They said I was part of the Light program, a plan to use life as power." She looked up, her eyes glimmering faintly. They wanted to create living reactors. Ethan felt a chill. He had heard rumors, stories of planets experimenting with biotic energy to fuel warships. It was banned under galactic law, but desperate worlds ignored such rules. "So they used children?" he asked softly. Lyra nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "We were many at first, but when the energy grew inside us, some couldn't control it, they died." Her voice cracked. "My parents were scientists, They tried to save me, but the soldiers came. They burned the lab and called us monsters. Ethan clenched his fists, trying to hide his anger. He understood now why she was hunted, why the others mocked her. She wasn't cursed. She was something rare, something powerful, and that made people afraid. He walked closer and knelt beside her. Lyra, listen to me, he said quietly. You are not a monster, you hear me? She looked at him, her voice small. Then why does everyone hate me? Because they don't understand you, he said, his tone steady. And people fear what they don't understand. Her tears fell silently, shining like liquid light. Ethan reached out, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. I don't care what they say, you're safe here, he whispered. Lyra closed her eyes, letting herself believe it, if only for a moment. But safety was fragile on Virilia. Far above the desert, a patrol drone passed, scanning for unauthorized energy sources. It detected a strange signal from Ethan's outpost, the same signature that came from Lyra's body. The data was instantly transmitted to the planetary guards. Red lights blinked on their consoles, and a voice said coldly, "Target found." Back at the shelter, Ethan had no idea what was coming. He was sitting at his desk, updating his logs, when Lyra suddenly gasped. The heater's flame flickered, and she whispered, "They're coming." Ethan stood up, confused. Who? Lyra's glowing eyes turned toward the door, her voice trembling. The ones who want me dead. Outside, in the distance, engines roared in the sandstorm, lights flashing through the darkness. Ethan's heartbeat quickened, his hand instinctively reaching for his blaster. The peace they had built over days was about to shatter. He turned to Lyra, his voice firm but gentle, "Stay behind me." And for the first time since she met him, Lyra didn't feel like a helpless child. She felt something else, like a storm building inside her chest. A secret power waiting to rise. The soldiers arrive. The desert night was torn apart by the growl of engines and the flash of red searchlights cutting through the storm. Ethan stood by the window, his jaw tight, his eyes following the moving shadows beyond the dunes. Metal carriers were descending, their landing thrusters spraying clouds of sand into the air. He knew those ships, the planetary guards, mercenaries hired by the ruling council, ruthless and efficient. They didn't come for mercy, they came to collect. Inside the shelter, Lyra trembled near the heating lamp, her eyes flickering brighter than before. She could feel them, dozens of life signals moving closer, each one pulsing like fire against her senses. Her voice shook as she whispered, "They found me." Ethan turned toward her, his expression calm but his heart racing. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Listen to me. You stay behind that wall, no matter what happens." Lyra shook her head, tears already forming. "They'll kill you if you protect me." Ethan gave a small smile, the kind soldiers give before battle. "I've faced worse odds." The first explosion hit the front gate, shaking the entire outpost. Metal shards flew across the room, and sparks burst from the ceiling. Ethan grabbed his rifle and crouched near the control console, activating the external shields. The shimmering energy field flickered to life, holding for a moment against the storm of bullets before fading out. "Damn it," he muttered. "They've got disruptors." The radio cracked, and a cold voice echoed through the speakers. "This is Commander Varys of the Planetary Guard," the voice declared. "You are harboring a classy biohazard subject. Surrender the creature immediately or face elimination." Ethan glanced at Lyra, whose eyes filled with fear and pain. "They call me a creature," she whispered, just like before. Ethan tightened his grip on the rifle. "You're not a creature, you're a life worth saving." The door shook violently as the guards tried to breach it. Ethan moved to the side, setting up a manual defense barrier. The first guard broke through, armored in black with glowing visors, shouting, "Get the target." Ethan fired a warning shot, the plasma bolt striking the floor near their feet. "Step back," he shouted. "She's under human protection." The soldiers laughed. "Human protection? You're outnumbered 10-1. But Ethan didn't move, his body blocking the narrow hallway, his voice steady. "You'll have to go through me first." Behind him, Lyra's heart raced, the machines around her starting to hum softly. The lights flickered, her pulse syncing with the rhythm of the energy grid. Something deep inside her was awakening, something that had been buried since the lab burned. Outside, another explosion hit the side wall, and dust rained down from the ceiling. Ethan ducked and fired again, hitting one of the attackers, sending him crashing into the wall. "Ethan!" Lyra cried out, seeing blood on his sleeve. "I'm fine," he said quickly, his breath short. "Just stay back." But Lyra couldn't stay still anymore. She felt the air around her thicken, vibrating with unseen power. Her veins glowed faintly, lines of white-blue light tracing across her arms. The heater beside her flared, the consoles blinked wildly, and a low hum filled the entire base. The soldiers noticed it too, their visors flashing red as their sensors overloaded. "What's happening?" one shouted. Ethan turned, his eyes widening. "Lyra, no." She stepped into the open, tears on her glowing face, her voice breaking. "Stop hurting him," she screamed. A surge of light burst from her chest, pure energy expanding in a wave that shattered the remaining windows. Every machine, every weapon, every light in the outpost flickered violently. The soldiers fell to their knees, their armor sizzling as power surged through their systems. Outside, their ships began to short-circuit, alarms echoing into the storm. Ethan shielded his eyes, the brilliance nearly blinding. "Lyra," he shouted, trying to reach her through the storm of light. But she stood still, surrounded by floating dust particles frozen midair, her body radiating power and sorrow. When the light finally faded, silence followed. The soldiers lay unconscious, their armor cracked and smoking. The sandstorm had stopped as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Ethan stumbled forward, kneeling beside Lyra, who had collapsed on the floor. Her skin was pale again, her glow dimmed, her breathing shallow. He lifted her gently, his voice shaking. "Lyra, stay with me." Her lips moved weakly. "I didn't mean to hurt them." "You didn't," Ethan whispered, brushing the dust from her face. "You just stopped them." He looked around at the wreckage, the lights dead, the systems fried, his outpost nothing more than a shell. But he didn't care. She was alive. He carried her to the medical pod and set her down, activating a low-power stabilizer. Her heartbeat steadied slightly, and Ethan sat beside her, exhausted but relieved. Then his communicator beeped, faint, distorted through the static. "Unit 47, respond. Reports of an energy surge detected from your sector," a voice said. Ethan switched it off immediately, his eyes hard. "They'll send more," he muttered to himself. "They'll never stop." He looked at Lyra again, sleeping peacefully now under the weak glow of the emergency light. He took a deep breath and whispered, "Then we run." Outside, the horizon burned with dawn, red and gold spreading across the dunes. The smoke from the destroyed ships rose into the air like ghosts fading into morning. Ethan stood tall, his silhouette outlined against the rising suns. Behind him, a small, broken shelter still hummed faintly, but inside it, something greater had been born, a bond stronger than fear, stronger than war. And from that day, Ethan knew the truth. The galaxy would come to hunt her, but he would fight them all, because kindness, once given, had made him more human than ever. The escape. The suns had barely risen when Ethan began packing whatever equipment still worked. The outpost was in ruins, walls cracked and lights dead, yet the silence outside was worse than any explosion. Burned metal ships lay half-buried in the sand, smoke curling into the golden sky. Ethan moved fast, his body aching, his shoulder bleeding from the fight, but his mind focused on one thing: get Lyra to safety. She woke weakly on the med bed, her body glowing faintly under the flickering emergency light. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "are they gone?" He turned toward her, relief softening his tired face. "For now, yes." She looked at the shattered doorway and the charred sand beyond it. "What did I do?" she asked, her voice filled with fear. Ethan knelt beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You saved us," he said gently. "You didn't destroy them. You stopped them from hurting anyone else." Lyra shook her head, her eyes glistening. "They'll come again, stronger." Ethan nodded slowly. "That's why we can't stay." He helped her stand, wrapping a small cloak around her to shield her from the sandstorm outside. They stepped into the open desert, the wreckage of the night before, now a graveyard of steel. Ethan loaded supplies into a hover skiff, water pods, energy cells, and an old navigation unit that barely worked. Lyra climbed in quietly, looking back at the outpost one last time. That place had been her first home since the war, and now it was nothing but dust. She held the blanket tight around herself and whispered, "I didn't mean for this to happen." Ethan looked at her, his expression kind but firm. "You can't control what they made you into," he said, "but you can decide what you'll become." The skiff's engines roared to life, lifting them over the dunes. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, a sea of golden sand under a harsh twin sun. For hours, they said nothing, the wind howling around them as the horizon shimmered like fire. Ethan checked the radar. The signals behind them were faint but moving. "They've started tracking again," he muttered, his jaw tightening. Lyra lowered her head, guilt heavy in her chest. "I'm the reason they're after you." He gave a small smile. "No," he said, "you're the reason I'm still fighting." As the day burned on, they reached a canyon filled with old war debris, rusted ships, broken drones, the bones of battles long forgotten. Ethan steered the skiff into the narrow path, shutting off the engine to hide their trail. They walked the rest of the way, their boots crunching against cracked stone. In the shadows of the cliffs, they found an ancient transport hub buried half under sand. Ethan scanned it with his wrist device. "This might still have a working core," he said. Lyra looked around, the place cold and silent. She touched the old walls, and the moment her hand met the metal, faint blue veins of light spread through it. The ancient systems hummed to life, machinery awakening from decades of sleep. Ethan stared in awe. "You did that again." Lyra looked at her glowing fingers, frightened. "It listens to me," she said softly. "Then let it," Ethan replied. "Because we need a ship." They worked together for hours, cleaning the dust and connecting old circuits. Lyra's power acted like a living key, unlocking systems no human could access. By nightfall, the hangar lights flickered back on, revealing an old but intact cargo vessel marked Starpath 9. Ethan ran his hand across its hull, smiling faintly. This might just fly. They boarded it, and Lyra took a seat near the control deck, watching Ethan ignite the engines. For a moment, the ship coughed and sputtered, but then the thrusters glowed bright and steady. As the doors opened, the canyon filled with roaring wind and shimmering sand. But before they could lift off, the radar beeped violently. Ethan's eyes widened. "They're here." Outside, lights appeared over the horizon, dozens of pursuit drones and patrol ships closing in fast. Lyra's hands tightened around the seat. "They won't let us go." Ethan smirked. "Then we don't ask for permission." He slammed the throttle, and the Starpath 9 shot upward, engines screaming as it burst through the dust storm. Laser fire streaked past the cockpit, explosions lighting up the sky behind them. Ethan swerved between canyons, the old ship rattling with every shockwave. Lyra focused, her eyes glowing brighter. The control systems flickered, then stabilized under her touch. "I can help you fly," she said quickly. "Then help me," Ethan replied, trusting her completely. Her power flowed through the ship's circuits, boosting its shields, synchronizing the engine rhythm to her heartbeat. For the first time, the ship responded like it was alive. Ethan grinned. "Good girl," he muttered, gripping the controls tighter. They darted through the clouds, leaving the guards far behind. When they finally broke through the upper atmosphere, the stars spread before them like an endless ocean of light. Lyra gasped softly. It was her first time seeing the galaxy from above. So beautiful, so wide, and for the first time, she wasn't trapped beneath it. She was part of it. Ethan leaned back, breathing heavily, his voice calm but full of awe. "You did it, Lyra," he said. "You saved us." She turned to him, a small smile breaking through her exhaustion. "We saved each other." He chuckled quietly, nodding. "Yeah, we did." But as they drifted through orbit, the radar still blinked faintly, a single signal following them from afar. Ethan's face hardened again. "They won't stop until they get what they want," he murmured. Lyra looked out the window at the stars and whispered, "Then we'll keep running until they learn what kindness can do." The Starpath 9 vanished into the darkness, leaving behind a dying world and a trail of golden dust. And somewhere deep inside the ship, in the quiet hum of its reborn engines, something new had begun. Not just survival, but hope. Hope carried by a human who refused to give up, and an alien child who could light the stars themselves. The choice. Days passed as the Starpath 9 drifted silently through the void, far from any trade routes or beacon lines. The hum of the engines was steady but tired, echoing faintly through the corridors like a heartbeat in a hollow chest. Ethan sat in the cockpit, staring at the navigation map flickering on the cracked screen. They had fuel for one more jump, maybe two if they pushed the reserves. Lyra sat nearby, wrapped in a blanket, gazing through the glass at the endless stretch of stars. Each one shimmered like a story waiting to be told, a reminder that the galaxy was vast, but not kind. Ethan finally broke the silence, his voice rough from sleepless nights. "Command's been trying to reach me," he said quietly. "They sent a signal an hour ago." Lyra looked up, confused. "Your people?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah." He played the recording on the console. A cold, mechanical voice filled the cabin. "Captain Ethan Ward, this is Central Command. You are ordered to return immediately for debriefing. Abandon all unauthorized cargo. Failure to comply will result in revocation of rank and termination of privileges." The message repeated twice before fading into static. Lyra lowered her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "They mean me." Ethan didn't respond right away, his hands resting on the control panel. He already knew what the right decision was for a soldier, but not for a human. After a long silence, he said softly, "They'll hunt you, no matter where we go." Lyra's fingers tightened around the blanket. "Then leave me somewhere," she said, her voice trembling. "They won't hurt you if you go back." Ethan turned sharply toward her, his eyes filled with disbelief. "You think I'd do that?" he said, his tone sharper than before. She flinched but didn't look away. "It's the only way." He shook his head, standing up, pacing near the console. "No, Lyra, I'm not leaving you to die. You don't abandon someone who trusted you." Her eyes filled with tears, glowing faintly in the dim light. "You'll lose everything because of me." Ethan smiled bitterly. "Maybe what I'm losing doesn't matter anymore." They sat in silence again, the stars watching like silent witnesses. In that quiet moment, something inside Lyra shifted. She remembered the faces of the soldiers who used her, the cold machines, the screams of the others who couldn't survive the experiments. And she looked at Ethan, the only one who had ever looked at her like she was more than a weapon. Her voice broke softly. "I don't want you to suffer because of what I am." Ethan placed a hand over hers, his voice low and certain. "You're not what they made you. You're what you choose to be." Hours later, alarms broke the stillness. The radar lit up in red, blinking fast, a fleet emerging from hyperspace. Ethan's heart sank. They found us. Through the viewport, sleek metallic ships appeared, forming a blockade around the sector. The voice of Commander Varys echoed once again over the comms. "Captain Ward, this is your final warning. Power down your engines and surrender the subject. You will be spared." Ethan didn't move, his hand hovering over the throttle. He looked at Lyra, her expression calm but sad. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Yes, I do." The enemy ships began to charge their weapons, the air inside the cabin humming with rising energy. Lyra stood up slowly, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. "Ethan," she said, "let me end this." He turned quickly. "No, you'll die if you use that much power." She shook her head, tears already forming. "If I don't, they'll destroy us both." She walked toward the center of the ship, her bare feet leaving faint trails of light on the floor. "Promise me," she whispered, "that you'll live." Ethan's throat tightened. "Don't you dare." But she smiled. That same gentle smile he'd seen the first night she said his name. The ship's lights began to flicker as her energy rose. Panels cracked, and the air vibrated with pure force. The enemy fleet outside opened fire, streams of plasma racing toward them like burning arrows. Ethan tried to steer, but the controls froze. The star path, 9 trembled as the power around Lyra grew too strong for the systems to handle. She turned one last time, her voice soft and full of peace. "You once told me I was made to destroy," she said. "But maybe I was made to protect." A burst of radiant energy erupted from her body, flooding the entire ship with white-blue light. The explosion expanded outward, enveloping the pursuing fleet. For a moment, space itself glowed like dawn. Every enemy ship went dark, their systems fried, drifting silently like shadows in the void. Ethan shielded his eyes, shouting her name, "Lyra." When the light faded, the ship was silent again. The engines were dead, and Lyra lay collapsed on the floor, her glow fading slowly. Ethan crawled to her side, pulling her into his arms, his voice breaking. "Lyra, stay with me, please." Her eyes fluttered open, dim but peaceful. "You kept your promise," she whispered weakly. "You showed me kindness." Ethan shook his head, tears falling freely. "You saved us all, kid." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Then it was worth it." And as the stars reflected in her fading eyes, she whispered, "Don't forget me." The ship drifted silently through the wreckage of the destroyed fleet. Ethan sat beside her still form, the faint hum of residual energy surrounding her body like a heartbeat fading into eternity. He looked out into the endless dark, his voice barely audible. "I won't," he said. "I never will." Outside, the stars shimmered gently, as if bowing in respect. And far away, the first light of a new dawn broke across the galaxy. Not the light of war or fire, but the echo of a girl who chose love over fear. The girl who once searched for food in trash and became the light that saved worlds. The new dawn. The wreckage of the battle drifted silently in orbit, fragments of ships turning slowly under the pale light of distant suns. For hours, there was no sound, no movement, only the quiet pulse of a dying ship floating through the void. Inside the Starpath 9, Ethan sat alone in the dim cockpit, the light from the shattered stars flickering across his face. His hands were clasped tightly, his knuckles white, his eyes fixed on the still form lying on the floor beside him. Lyra hadn't moved since the blast, her body faintly glowing, surrounded by a shimmer like starlight caught in glass. He had tried everything: manual defibrillators, emergency nanobots, field stabilizers, but nothing worked. Each attempt drained another ounce of his hope. Finally, he stopped, sitting beside her with a quiet exhaustion that went beyond pain. "Come on, kid," he whispered, his voice rough. "You didn't do all this to give up now." The silence that followed was heavier than space itself. Days passed like hours, the ship floating aimlessly through the dark. Ethan had managed to restart one auxiliary system, enough to keep oxygen and minimal light. He recorded his logs daily, though his words grew fewer each time. "Day 3, he muttered into the recorder. "No response from Lyra. Energy readings remain stable, but she's gone." He stopped, closing his eyes. "If anyone finds this, know that she wasn't a weapon, she was a child, a light that shouldn't have been extinguished." He leaned back, staring out at the infinite horizon. Sometimes he thought he saw movement in her glow, a flicker like breathing. He told himself it was just the reflection from the console, but deep down, he refused to stop believing. He couldn't, not after everything she'd done. Then one night, as the ship passed near an uncharted nebula, something changed. The nebula glowed with a strange blue light, waves of radiation passing through the hull. The readings on the monitor spiked, the same energy signature that had once come from Lyra's body. Ethan rushed to her side, his heart pounding. Her glow intensified, spreading across the floor like liquid starlight. He froze, afraid to touch her, afraid to breathe. Then her chest rose, just slightly, and her fingers twitched. "Lyra," he whispered, disbelief and hope crashing through him all at once. Her eyes opened slowly, not the dull blue they once were, but pure white light, radiant and calm. When she spoke, her voice echoed softly, layered like a melody. "Ethan," she said, "I heard you calling." He knelt beside her, his throat tight. You were gone." "I was changing," she said, her voice gentle. "The energy, it didn't destroy me. It remade me." He looked at her in awe, her body now translucent, every heartbeat sending ripples of light through the air. She was no longer flesh and blood. She was something beyond it, something luminous and free. Ethan laughed through tears, wiping his face. "You scared the hell out of me." Lyra smiled faintly. "You always worry too much." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Old habit." Then he paused, realizing what she was now. "Can you stay?" Her expression softened, sadness flickering beneath the glow. "I can't," she whispered. "I'm not bound to this form anymore. The energy inside me, it's part of the galaxy now." He looked down, his voice breaking. "So this is goodbye." She reached out, her hand hovering over his cheek, though he felt warmth as if she really touched him. Goodbye isn't the right word, she said softly. You gave me life when everyone else saw a monster. That doesn't end. Not really. The ship began to hum again, systems flickering back to life. Panels lit up, engines glowed, power readings climbed higher than ever before. Lyra's energy flowed through the circuits, restoring everything she had once broken. The ship was alive again, reborn like her. Ethan looked around in awe. What are you doing? Her voice filled the cabin, echoing through the air. Giving you a way home, she said, her light growing brighter, and giving them hope. Outside the window, the nebula pulsed, and a beam of light shot from the ship into the void. It expanded outward, reaching distant systems, igniting dormant satellites, reviving lost stations. The signal carried her energy across the galaxy, a frequency of life, a message of unity and renewal. In every corner of the stars, dormant technology woke. Crops grew again on barren worlds. Dying cities flickered back to light. Ethan watched, tears streaming silently down his face. She's healing the galaxy, he whispered. And somewhere in that brilliance, he heard her voice one last time. Remember, Ethan, kindness isn't weakness, it's creation. The light filled the entire ship, washing everything in white. When it faded, the star path, 9 floated gently near a green and blue world, untouched and alive. Ethan blinked, his surroundings calm again, the ship humming steadily. He looked out the window, and his breath caught. A new colony world, lush forests, rivers of light, and in the distance, a single aurora stretching across the sky in the shape of wings. He smiled softly, whispering, "You made it, kid." He walked to the control deck and pressed the record button one last time. Final log, Captain Ethan Ward, he said quietly. Mission complete, though not in the way command intended. The universe doesn't need another weapon, it needed her. And maybe, it needed a reminder of what it means to be human. He glanced out the window at the shimmering aurora, his voice soft but strong. Lyra lives on, in every spark of light, every act of mercy, every world reborn. As the ship descended slowly toward the planet, the aurora above rippled once more. And in that glow, for just a heartbeat, Ethan thought he saw her, smiling, radiant, free. She who once searched for food in the trash, mocked and broken, now shining brighter than 1,000 suns. The universe would remember her not as a lab experiment, not as a cursed child, but as Lyra, the light that taught humanity what compassion truly means. And in that quiet dawn, as the star path, 9 disappeared through the clouds, a new chapter began. A story not of war or sorrow, but of rebirth, of hope, of how one human said, "Come with me," and changed the stars forever.